Hi, I am Tony Russo, and this is Brief Introduction from Kates-Boylston, a quick conversation with death care professionals about how and why they do what they do. In this bonus episode, we are speaking with Genevieve Keeney-Vazquez. She is the president and CEO of the National Museum of Funeral History, and she's been there for a little bit more than 2 decades, as we'll find out. Lots of great stories coming up, and she is a great storyteller. I think you're going to get a kick out of the show. Before we get into it, I do want to remind you to take a look at events.katesboylston.com to check out all of our upcoming events. We have a big one in November that is in Detroit. It is an in-person one. It is called Advances in Funeral Innovations. But also coming up in September, we have a marketing summit. And in October, we have a funeral technology summit. And those are virtual. So again, just check out events.katesboylston.com. Link in the show notes. And now let's get into this chat with Genevieve. So I actually was a history major, and I know some people who have become museum curators. I don't know any CEOs though. How do you get that gig? And what led you to take this position in Texas? And how long have you been doing it?
I've been doing it now, believe it or not, for almost 20 years. I can't believe where does time go.
Yeah.
I want to say almost the job chose me. I didn't choose the job, but it's kind of my journey started out when I was 7 years old. And I look back on my journey. I'm like, wow, how did I end up being the president and CEO of the National Museum of Funeral History and being able to curate such fascinating exhibits to educate people about the most inevitable part of our life and the one we don't like to talk about. And we don't like to think about, and that's death. But it is part of life, and I feel like I have the distinct honor to be able to educate on that, as well as get people to shift their paradigm and learn to embrace one of life's most guaranteed moments.
And so how did you find yourself in this particular position?
So my journey, like I said, began when I was 7 years old, and I always, after hearing a story on the news about an unfortunate death of a baby, I wasn't watching the program, I was listening and could hear it. And so it kind of planted a seed of curiosity to understand what death is, what death looks like, and what happens biologically to the human body when death does present itself to us. And that curiosity continued to stay with me as I began growing and learning and getting older. And so I would dabble in it when and where I could, and when it was applicable and didn't seem weird and odd. We didn't have information access to it the way we do today. Today
Right.
You can just type in a search word and boom, you get all the information you want. Well, you're growing up in a really small rural town in Colorado, information is very scarce. And so you're more apt to hoping to stumble across some information, or perhaps you experience it firsthand, which really didn't happen for me until I got into the military. And when I joined the United States Army and I went off to Germany to live, I didn't realize that there was not a whole lot of people to help deal with death when it happened in our host nation and to our small community there. And come to find out that we at the clinic, I worked at the clinic, I was a Army medic. And when we worked there, it was our responsibility to care for the American fallen soldiers who died in theater or family members who were visiting them across the seas. If they happened to die also while visiting, it was our responsibility as the clinic to handle those remains, generate the death certificate and all of the details in getting their bodies back home to America. And so in learning that, of course, nobody wanted to raise their hand and be voluntold to take care of a death when it happened in our community. And it was something that I became very eagerly willing to volunteer. And it thrusted me into learning a lot about death, the process of caring for human remains, and actually shipping human remains internationally. And it kind of snowballed into understanding that I think my best calling in life is a funeral director and a mortician. I wanted to be a coroner, but it kind of shifted gears when I actually put myself into the scenario, thanks to the United States Army. I came back here to the United States to go to school at Commonwealth Institute of Funeral Services to get my associate's degree in applied science and my license in funeral directing and embalming. And while I was going to school, they needed volunteers at the National Museum of Funeral History. And they would always go to the students and say, if anyone's willing to volunteer to help out on a project or help out on stuff that needed to be done around the museum, they were always looking for eager participants. And I'm always eager to volunteer and help out others. And so I raised my hand, got to know the staff of the museum. At the time, it was Robert Bedecker, Sr., who was the president, who is now our chairman, and got to know him and Lucy, whom were the staff at the time. And we decided at that time that there was going to be an well, I don't say we, they were working on an expansion to the National Museum of Funeral History and needed a project manager. And once again, I said, well, I would be strongly interested, have absolutely no background in museum, curation, management, none of the above. However, the Army also taught me that you could adapt and overcome and learn as you go. And with that quality of training, I was able to interview with the board of the National Museum of Funeral History. They accepted my application. And so I always like to tell everybody that I started out by volunteering to hang the light bulbs. And it culminated into now being the president and CEO of the museum. And it's such a proud title that I wear because it's not really about the title. It's about what the museum provides the public, the education that we're able to put forth and really give our profession the recognition that it deserves, how long we've been around and how we service people at their most vulnerable time and greatest need in life.
Speaking of, learning as you go, the foreign aspect of what gets displayed and what doesn't get displayed and when and where and things like that. What were some of the tough lessons you learned? What were some of the easy lessons you learned? Any big victories early on?
I want to say probably our biggest victory early on was the expansion project, that we were able to redesign some of our exhibits in a way that were more storytelling and somewhat immersive. And that project really put the museum on the map. Before we were just only if you knew we existed, kind of drove by and saw the sign and said, "Oh, what's that?" And we were looked at as a museum of the odd, something that's weird. We'd only be visited by maybe people who are in the industry or people who might have driven by the sign and saw the National Museum of Funeral History 2 miles that way, kind of thing.
That's why I've been to all of those. I drive across the country pretty much once a year, and I stop at every sign that looks like that. If it's within a reasonable, if it's less than 10 minutes off the road, I've seen it.
I always tell myself I always want to add extra time into my travels so I can do stuff like that. So far, that hasn't happened. But yeah, so we were really a museum that was heavily industry driven, if you will, like people who were in industry, who had family members who wanted to learn more about their loved one's chosen profession. And again, people just driving by and being curious. And now we have been able to truly transform the museum into a well-renowned educational institution that not only educates the public, but honors those that have left before us. And so it's, one of the challenges I've always faced is creating that delicate balance and maintaining that balance between honoring the living and respecting the dead through our exhibits.
And can you talk to me about your early acquisitions? Like, how did you learn how to make acquisitions, and how did you learn because you must have to occasionally refuse offers of donation.
Yeah, it's unfortunate when we do have to refuse donations, and it's just because we're spatially challenged. The museum has really, grown to its seams and somewhat bursting at some of them. Unfortunately, I wish we had more space to bring on more collections. Hopefully one day, my dream is to get the museum into a larger facility so we can expand on some of our exhibits. But our acquisitions really go all the way back to the beginning, beyond 1992. But in 1992 is when we broke ground. But Mr. Waltrip and a couple of his friends in the funeral profession, they had a lot of their own personal collections of funerary items, predominantly funerary cars. And they needed a place to house these vehicles. And so when the museum first started in 1992, it was very much a warehouse feel, concrete floor, big kind of stoic lighting, and a bunch of cars. historical hearses, horse-drawn, motorized, family cars. That's really what made up the basis of the museum. And then over time, when people had things within their collection, or Mr. Waltrip knew of people in the funerary industry, they were able to start donating. A lot of the acquisitions we do have is, we were saving our tools of our trade from the landfill. Because what are you going to do with a cooling board that once truly held a dead body, or the tools that were once used on a body? Unless you have a special niche for those items, a lot of people just found no value in them, and thus they were being discarded, as was the tools of our trade and the history of our industry. So the museum really became a collection point of those important elements of our profession and the history that embodies them. And so that's how the museum was born. And today we pretty much now start to curate our exhibits around really strong educational experiences and or information that the people that, when going into a funeral home and you're faced with all these questions, we try to help you answer those questions before you need to really answer those questions. Like, do you want to be buried, or do you want to be cremated? Well, if you choose burial, this is some of your options. This is what you can choose from. And if you choose cremation, these are your options. So really trying to help people, like I say, expand their knowledge on our profession, because these questions will have to be answered one day.
And is there anything particular that you were able to secure for the museum that you're particularly proud of, or something that people don't know that you have, that you were able to put your hands on and now you have it, something like that?
Most definitely. Probably my most challenging, my most persevering, my most tested piece in our exhibit is our replica of the Shroud of Turin. That piece was a journey within itself. 2018, I was approached by a deacon who was giving a tour of our Pope exhibit to a bunch of his students, and we serendipitously met in the museum. I'm usually always now in my office handling all the administrative portions of the exhibit. The administrative duties of the museum. I happened to go in that day, and he said, "Have you ever thought of bringing the Shroud of Turin here?" And I thought, what? From my understanding, the Shroud of Turin never leaves Italy, and it's a heavily guarded piece. However, would that come to the National Museum of Funeral History, and where is the fit and the tie-in? Well, after further research, I've learned that you can request from the Bishop of Turin a certified copy of the shroud. And the shroud, for people who don't know, is the cloth that they believed wrapped the body of Jesus Christ. Jewish burial customs do entail wrapping the body in a shroud. And so we're talking about a very historical funerary item, which is the shroud itself. And the image that's left on it, they believe to be that of a crucified man known as Jesus. So thus began the journey. Put a request in for put together a letter to request a certified copy of the shroud from the Bishop of Turin. And it kind of started to gain a lot of momentum. And 2 weeks before COVID actually happened to us here in the United States at a large magnitude in March of 2020, we were just set to launch our capital campaign, and it got canceled because of COVID, and we all went into hibernation. And during the hibernation, unbeknownst to us, the authorities over the seeds in the vault that is heavily guarded was given authorization to withdraw seeds from the same time period as the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. And they were the flax seeds that were grown in order to create the linen of the shroud. And so, unbeknownst to all of us in 2020, from about April to August, these seeds were planted in a field in Bergamo, Italy, and grew the flax in order to be harvested in August and create the linen that actually yielded 10 copies of the shroud to be laser printed on the image. Unfortunately, 3 of those were destroyed during production, thus leaving only 7 copies available to be distributed throughout the world. And I still had my letter, and now we're talking 2021, heading into 2022, and I still am waiting word
Right.
from the letter that I sent in 2018. One day I am in my office and I get an email that says, "Thank you so much for your patience. And due to your patience, we are gifting you a certified copy of the Shroud." Not only is it just any certified copy, it's one of the 7 certified copies that was created from the original flaxseed and woven on ancient looms to replicate as close as possible to the original Shroud. And when I was holding that piece in my hand, I have to say that was my greatest accomplishment of all exhibits I've curated to date.
Wow, that is fantastic. What do you have coming up? What's the next year look like? What does the future look like in the immediate and long
So
term?
yes, the museum has always looking for new things to bring to bring the visitors. Right now, we will be curating an exhibit, the Funerals of the Royals, featuring Queen Elizabeth, and so we have created a replica of her lying in state. And we also be making additions to our current exhibit, which is the history of cremation, bringing in some new elements to help further educate people. Mainly, like if someone chooses cremation, sometimes they don't realize that they can choose they can still have a full funeral. They don't have to purchase an entire casket. They have what they call rental caskets, and so we're bringing that element into the exhibit to really help people expand their minds and their understanding of what a funeral will look like for their loved one if they choose cremation. And so, yeah, those are some of our big points. We're also updating our Pope exhibit, the Celebrating the Lives and Deaths of the Pope. We'll be featuring Pope Benedict, who has passed away, as well as Pope Francis. So we are always keeping our ear to the Vatican and keeping that updated. And then also we are trying to work on some elements to create a green burial exhibit and talk about some of the unique features that entail green burials.
Excellent. And now, is there anything I should have asked and didn't, or something that you wanted to say and I didn't give you the chance?
I always ask listeners, never judge a book by its cover and never judge the National Museum of Funeral History by its name. We truly are a fascinating museum to really expand your mind and understanding to not only yourself, your loved ones, but also your children.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for your time and for sharing your story.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited. Anytime I get an opportunity to speak about the museum, I am always a willing participant.
Before I let you go, I do want to give you a public service announcement. If you have the opportunity to stop at any roadside museum, as someone who does it regularly, I can't recommend it highly enough. It'll either be awesome like the National Museum of Funeral History, or it will be a complete dud. But even in their dudness, the roadside attractions are always they have their own standard for what counts as fun. Brief Introduction has been a Kates-Boylston production. It was written and edited by me, Tony Russo. Please subscribe wherever you're listening now. If you're listening on your desktop, just navigate on your phone to your podcatcher. It is a little purple circle. If you have an iPhone, if you have an Android, it could be Spotify, it could be Pandora, it could be Amazon Music, or some other podcatcher. Just type Funeral Service Insider into that podcatcher. We're the only one with that name. We'll come up. If you subscribe, then you will get the shows the moment that they come out. And we will be back in just a couple of days with our weekly Friday, in case you missed it, episodes, and we will catch you then.